Chapter 17. Light in the Tunnel. The radio played softly, tuned to a local music station. I looked at the embroidery in my hands and was amazed at the progress I had made on the bedspread. The purple was good with the yellow and white. The news announcer's voice penetrated my consciousness. From the state capitol, this story. California Supreme Court has voted 6-1 to abolish the death penalty in the state, citing cruel and unusual punishment. That's as much as I heard before the words repeated in my mind. Voted to abolish the death penalty in the state. That's us! A loud voice came from Leslie's direction. That's us! Nose gas chamber. Her voice choked. Pat was talking loudly. I couldn't piece together what she was saying. Almost unconsciously, I felt myself slipping off my bed toward the floor. I was on my knees, and the tears came. In seconds, the sobs were rising from deep in my chest, and I was weeping audibly, not loudly, but openly. And for the first time since my mother's death, I spoke to God. I remember distinctly. I called him God, not Father or Lord. It was only 2 short sentences. Thanks, God. I want to thank you for letting me live. And all the others, too. I stayed on my knees for several minutes. There were no interruptions. I'm certain that all across California at that moment, similar scenes were taking place. I merely stared at the blanket on my bed, and then at the embroidery. They can't kill me, I said to myself. They can't kill me. I've got a whole life ahead of me. What will happen now? Death Row sprang to life. All 5 of us talked at once. Even the staff joined in. For the first time in 2 years, I heard real joy and happiness in the voices of Pat and Leslie. All the cynicism and bitterness seemed gone. Their laughter had a tinkle to it. I told you they weren't going to kill you. It was Claire talking from across the corridor. I told you it would eventually be abolished. She was right. She'd spoken often as our jailhouse lawyer, but I had never paid any attention to her. I had fully expected to die, and I was surprised at the impact the news had on me. The relief was almost palpable in SSU. All of us babbled and laughed. Now they'll have to put us on mainline, Claire said. That was an unexpected thought. Hey, yeah, said Leslie. They can't keep us in here now. We'll get out with the others. I wonder what kind of jobs we'll get, said Jennifer. And that was something else to think about. New vistas were opening in rapid succession. We'd be able to hold jobs and not just sit in our cells all day and night. Late that afternoon, I lay in my bed, staring at the cream-colored ceiling, and once again my thoughts began at the center of my life, me, but then moved in circles, around and around, before drifting out towards something else. Yes, it was God. What about God? Why had this happened to me today? It was just like other times in the past, when I probably should have died. Why didn't I die? When I was just a baby, I became very sick. The diagnosis was scarlet fever, and the doctors told my parents I might die. But it turned out to be measles, and I recovered. When I was 4 years old, I was riding in the back seat of a car between my father and my aunt. We were crossing the Golden Gate Bridge when we were struck head-on by a truck. I was the only one to escape without a bruise. There were the times when I was stoned out of my mind on grass or acid, driving up and down the California freeways at 90 and 100 miles an hour. I should have been killed, but I wasn't. There was the crazy time of delivery of my baby and I survived. And now this. 9 people in their graves for whom I was partly responsible. My life was spared again. The swirling increased in my mind, and I was unable to concentrate. Everything was mixed up. I was full of hate and bitterness, yet I was alive. I blinked my eyes and the ceiling came into focus again. What day is it? I thought. February 18th, 1972. Within 3 weeks, Claire and Jennifer were moved out of SSU in their first step toward life on the mainline campus. What about us? Pat, Leslie, and I said, almost in chorus to the staff that day. We're told you will not be moved, the watchwoman said evenly, despite her obvious discomfort. You're too great an escape risk. You're too famous. Boom. The curses and epithets thundered around the entire unit. I'm sure the staff had never heard worse talk from any convict. The next morning, Pat shaved her head in protest. She said she had heard from Charlie during the night. Charlie told me to, she said simply. Leslie and I followed her action immediately. Reaction came quickly. The superintendent of the prison, Mrs. Carlson, arrived and stood in the corridor facing us. Your little act of rebellion will not get you moved, she said. You seem to think your rights are being violated. Well, let's have an understanding on this. You have a right to 2 meals a day and a shower, and you are to be let out once a day. Anything else is a privilege. Hatred seethed along the 33-foot corridor. Attitudes in SSU deteriorated badly over the next several months as we watched things pass by. The United States Supreme Court ruled in June, similarly to the state court, that the death penalty violated the Constitution and that the way it was administered was cruel and unusual punishment. But nothing seemed to affect us. We were becoming vegetables, and we knew it. This condition was apparent to all watching us, and one day a light in our tunnel of darkness became visible, in the person of a happy, smiling woman named Carleen Faith. She arrived at SSU and met with the 3 of us. I'm from the University of Santa Cruz, she said, and we are offering college courses to residents at CIW, including you. They will be offered with credit toward a degree. She looked at the 3 of us, who were still showing the effects of vegetating. Do you think you would be interested? Why not? Leslie said. Give us some more information. Carleen, small and frail, smiled her very happy smile. She was in her early 30s and told us she would be able to bring in other instructors over the months ahead, and we'd be free to study just about anything we wanted. Literature, philosophy, journalism. The cloud of hatred seemed to dissipate a bit, and we agreed we'd like to sign up. As Carleen talked to each of us about her desires and needs, she and I were left alone for several minutes. Carleen, I said softly, my mind is empty, sometimes confused and messed up, but really empty. And you have an opportunity to teach me anything. I'm like an open vessel. Her smiling face became very serious. I will do my utmost not to abuse your emptiness. I will try not to infringe on your rights to learn and grow. One of the most important courses for me in those early days was one on women's studies. I suddenly found myself free from the male oppression I had so willingly walked into in my middle-teen years and had violently sealed in my relationships with Charlie and others in the family. For the first time, I got a view of my sexual degradation. For example, I began to glimpse how I had allowed myself to be domineered in the most primitive fashion by other people. In my drive for freedom, I had entered into the worst bondage possible. I unexpectedly found that I enjoyed reading and writing. My mind began to open up. Philosophy was fascinating, and I read deeply, although my understanding often faltered. Unhappily, I knew deep inside that I was still too dependent on other people. Only this time, there were people like Carlene and another instructor, Jean Gallic. And I was touched by the love and affection of Mrs. Smith, an occupational therapist from the psychiatric treatment unit at the prison, who came twice a week to work with the three of us on handcrafts and sewing. Friendship began to take root in these relationships too, especially with Jackie Christine, a counselor and psychological therapist who came with Carlene. Occasionally, the dirt within my existence was scraped away, enough for thoughts of goodness and human worth to be considered. These thoughts were nurtured by certain watchwomen and correctional officers who were regular parts of SSU life. Although the freeze from Pat and Leslie toward me showed no signs of thawing, the two of them were revealing signs of easing into thought patterns and mannerisms of individuals, not cultish family drones. Change was coming in for them, ever so slowly, although they refused to let me participate in it. One night I even heard them discussing the possibility that Helter Skelter is not coming down after all. Chapter 18. Escape. The early morning fog was beginning to lift, and patches of blue were spreading across the sky. Dew was still on the grass, mostly crabgrass actually, but Catherine and I didn't mind. It was going to be a beautiful spring morning, and our anticipation overcame any discomfort from the hard ground or the dampness. I plucked at the crabgrass between my knees and occasionally glanced into Catherine's brown eyes. She didn't look 30. The loss of nearly 40 pounds had left her at the well-proportioned size 9 figure she had displayed during our days at Spawn's Ranch. She was talking about her new man. Spider is such a beautiful man, Sadie. So much more together than Charlie ever was. Susan, I interrupted. Please, call me Susan, not Sadie. I'm sorry, she said, smiling. But don't be so touchy, woman. We don't have time to be hassling over names right now. There are more important things to be discussed. Catherine had always been intense, and she was more so then in 1973. She and Mary, both central figures from the Manson days, had arrived at SSU just a few weeks earlier, sentenced for an armed robbery conducted right after our conviction in the main trial. They had staged the robbery to get guns to try to break Charlie out of jail. Their charges didn't seem to merit SSU treatment, but they, like Pat, Leslie, and me, were considered high-security risks. Catherine, who had also been known as Gypsy, and Mary had been welcome additions to SSU for me. The cool treatment from my two co-defendants had never abated, and the newcomers provided me with someone to talk to at last. While we were all civil and formally polite to one another, there had been a definite three-way division of the five of us. Pat and Leslie, Catherine and Mary, and me, pretty much alone. I had begun to drift toward the latter two just for the sake of companionship. Catherine was still talking. I want to know if I can trust you or not to help me and my partner. It was strange that she should be asking if she could trust me. I hadn't completely made up my mind to her and Mary. Catherine spoke with a warmth that occasionally reached ferocity about freedom. She, in fact, intimidated me. "We've got to fight our way into freedom," she was saying again. "It can't be found in prison." That was obvious, I thought, but her intensity gave it deeper meaning. I was beginning to understand that she was not merely an outlaw. She was a revolutionary. "It's funny that you should ask me if you can trust me," I said as she paused. "My name is not the most trustworthy one in prison, and you know." I smiled wryly. "Can you trust me, you say? Hey, I'm not sure I trust myself, or even that I trust you." I'd never seen a harder look on a woman than the one that covered her face in that instant. It caused me to shudder. "If you blow my scene, I'll kill you. So don't play games with me. Either you're with me or you're against me. Which is it, Susan?" I tried not to look frightened. I had more than held my own with the old gypsy, but this was a different woman. "I'm with myself, Catherine," I said softly but firmly. "But I'll do what I can to help you out of there, if that's what you want. I may even decide to go with you, but I'm not committing myself that far at this time. If you trust me and I blow it, I know where I stand. Right?" I paused and added, "Right?" There was a long silence. I looked up. The sky was practically all clear, and the slight spring breeze was warming. I pulled on the crabgrass in front of me. "Okay, girl," Catherine said without looking at me. "This is what I want you to do. I want you to sit up tonight and watch the perimeter man and clock him. I want you to tell me tomorrow how many times he drives around the perimeter and how long between the times he passes SSU. All right?" I was still equivocating. "What on earth for, Catherine?" It sounded dumb, but I was sincere. The hardness returned to her face. "Look, do you want to ask questions and play games, or do you want out of this hellhole? You just do what I tell you, and as you prove yourself to me, I'll tell you more. A good con doesn't ask too many questions, Susan." She paused, and her face softened slightly. "If you remember nothing else about what I'm into and who I'm with, girl, you remember not to ask questions. Just do what you're told, and you'll be taken care of." Deep in my stomach was the feeling that comes after you've had the wind knocked out of you. It was that old feeling of mine. Fear and the beginnings of loneliness. I was cold again. But I refused to show my feelings. I had to stay tough. For good or for worse, and if I was going to keep my mind from slipping into the pit that so often beckoned to it, I needed someone to talk to. She claimed she was a pretty together white witch with real powers, and maybe she was. "Say, Kathy," I drawled after nearly a minute of silence, "tell me more about Spider." I had pushed the right button. We alternately sat and reclined on our little lawn for an hour as she spun out a fantastic tale of her new warrior, Prince Charming, everything a man ought to be. He was in one of the major prisons, the best, the most popular man in the joints, the most respected among the together revolutionists, the general of a new army. He actually kidnapped me one day while I was sitting on the corner waiting for Charlie to get out of jail, she said, and I've never been the same since. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was this Charlie all over again? She let me read one of his letters, and to my surprise, he named me as one who should join them. I perceived he was far ahead of Charlie in his cunning, yet much of his rap had the same ring of Charlie to it. "Let's walk," Kathy said suddenly. "I don't like sitting around where the cops can listen in. Besides, Spider says we've got to stay together physically. It's our best weapon against these pigs." So up we got from the sun-warmed grass and began to walk the L-shaped yard. I felt lazy, but Catherine took off like a runner, her hair flying behind. She was walking, but at a tremendous clip, her arms pumping like an old-fashioned steam locomotive. "Hey, Kathy, I thought you said walk. You're nearly running. Wait up." "Either catch up or be left behind, Susan," she said sharply. I jogged enough to catch up. I knew she wasn't talking only about her walk, and the thought of being left behind scared me. We walked for 45 minutes, but it wasn't long before the staff was watching every step. Our sergeant had a hound dog's nose for trouble, and he knew something was up. He had worked too many years with men in prison to relax his never turn your back on a con attitude. My legs were feeling like lead, so I welcomed his call for us to come in, but I wasn't going to let him know it. "All right, ladies, inside. It's lunchtime." He stood at the door like a sentry as we filed past. "Baker, when are you going to give up?" I said, my nastiness flaring fully. "When all the cons are buried 6 feet under and never see daylight, woman. So what do you think of that?" "Nothing, you fucking male chauvinist. Nothing." As I stepped inside the door, Catherine spoke quickly to me. "Cool it, Susan. The man is only doing his job." I expected and received, as soon as we were back in our cells that afternoon, a lecture on how to con the guards and keep them off our backs. Despite my experience, I still was too messed up to be very prison wives. That night, after the final count had been taken and all the good nights spoken, I sat up in my bed and stared out the window into the night. 4 rows of vertical steel bars and 4 of horizontal covered the window. A screen covered them from the inside. The outside was well lighted. I could see the perimeter road beyond the large field area outside our own small yard. First, there was our barbed wire fence, and then the high barb-topped fence 25 or 30 yards beyond. And then freedom. I shook my head. No way, I thought. There was no way. It seemed to me that Kathy and Mary could get through those bars on our windows, over the SSU fence, across that large open space with no trees or bushes, and over that outside fence with its rolls of barbed wire on top, placed there just for us after we had arrived. And besides that, there was the electronic beam along the fence and the spot man in his little tower a quarter-mile away. There were the headlights. That was the perimeter man making his first round in the car. 10:10. We had gone back to wearing watches since the Manson days. How were they going to cut the bars? And what about the fence? What if I go with them and we're busted? I asked myself. They'll never let me see daylight again. I shuddered inside. How long does it take that creep to go around? There they are. The headlights. 10:17. I wonder if Pat and Leslie will try to go with them. I shook my head negatively. So Spider thought I was worth trying to help, huh? I began to fantasize. Snap out of it, Susan. The thought broke into my consciousness. There is no game. This is for real. These people aren't playing. What are you going to do? If you're busted or get them busted, if you blow it one more time, girl, you can start counting the daisies and prepare to make fertilizer for some oak tree. There were the headlights again, 10:45. He's sure not consistent, I said. Into the darkness, suddenly I heard voices. Oh, bed check. I pulled the covers over my shoulders and closed my eyes. The watchwoman passed by and returned to her office. This is just like old times, I thought, noticing the feeling of fear in my stomach and my rapid breathing. Flashes of creepy crawling burst into my brain, then dissipated. I wasn't sure if the feeling was good or bad. There were the headlights again, 11:03. Man, I'm not used to this. I'm sleepy. Headlights, 11:15. Headlights, 11:20. And on into the night. To heck with this. I'm going to sleep. Well, give me the rundown, woman. Catherine was eager as I stood outside her window. It was my turn to be outside with Mary that morning. Is he consistent in his trips around the joint? No. It's anywhere from 3.5 minutes at the fastest to 20 minutes between trips. I think the guy in the perimeter must stop and talk with the guy on the spot. You'll have to ask Pat about that. Her room overlooks that scene. I can only see the roads and haystacks. Catherine pursed her lips. Okay, that's good enough. Now, I want you to draw a map of SSU for me. I need to send it to Spider so he can tell me which is the best route to take. I want every phone in the place marked, where the staff's office is, and a timetable of when they make their security calls. Here is how I want you to write it. She held up a plastic glass full of pale liquid. You'll draw it with this. It won't show on the paper till it's heated. Then he'll make it out. We'll just send an innocent little letter. I didn't do anything for 2 or 3 days after that. I was still wrestling with whether I could trust Catherine, although I felt myself drawing closer to her and Mary all the time. Pat and Leslie were still maintaining their Susan freeze, and I needed someone to trust in. Not to trust is not to live, I thought. Crazy idea. I'd misjudged people so many times, but I figured one more time. Maybe I'd win the prize this time. A real friend. Sometime later, walking with Mary, the endless circle we made in our yard, this time at a pace far more reasonable than Catherine's gallop. Although Mary's long, slim legs still kept me moving, I inquired about Gypsy's man. Mary, do you love Spider too? Her cool blue eyes peered out of their narrow slits in the morning's bright sun, and her customary frown turned into a look that said, "Don't come too close, Susan." But she said, "Why do you ask?" "I asked my question first, Mary." "It's none of your business, Susan," she said evenly, but yeah, I love him. "What about Charlie, Mary?" I asked rather innocently. "Did you get tired of his trip?" Her fierce look blistered me as she stopped and turned on me. "If you never mention him again to me, it will be too soon. I can't stand him, and I don't want to talk about the fucking creep. You understand?" Her fuse was short. "Yeah. All right, Mary. I hear where you're coming from. So, how's Pooh Bear?" "His name is Michael, and he's fine. I don't call him Pooh Bear anymore." "Hey, Mary, there's no need to be defensive with me. I'm not out to hurt you." She put her hands on her hips and stared hard into my face again. "Oh, yeah. Is that why you went to the grand jury? Don't talk your trash to me. You're going to have to prove to me you ain't going to hurt me anymore." I started to walk away. I was quivering like jello inside, but I still had the capacity for a tough exterior. I'll see you later, Mary. I don't want to be your whipping boy today, all right? Mary and Catherine may have been closer to me than Pat and Leslie during those mid-SSU days, but things obviously weren't going to be lovey-dovey. I thought about how Mary had got the blades in when she returned from making a court appearance in someone else's case. In her rectum. But not wire cutters, surely. Kathy's only visitor had been Jeannie. I looked at Kathy and she was laughing. She was dying to tell me as soon as I'd admit I didn't know. All right, I give up. I thought I knew, but not wire cutters. That's impossible. That's not the only place, you know, she said, giggling. Will it help you if I explain that the handles unscrew from the cutters and that it's only about 5 inches long and 2 inches wide when apart? You mean to tell me, Kathy, that Jeannie carried those things inside her vagina and old Baker didn't pick it up on the metal detector? That's what I mean to tell you, Susan. Baker is so busy looking for things that he misses everything. That's why I talk nice to him and don't want you yelling and swearing at him. It makes him mad, and we want him to like us and trust us. You get him all riled up and he wants to bust you. She paused a moment, then looked at me knowingly. And furthermore, if it ever comes down to it, don't be afraid to give a little bit more. What's more important, your chastity or your freedom? That set Catherine off on another of her lectures. I just wasn't up to it and said so, edging away toward the door. She continued on, walking in the cold wind and talking. The last words I heard before she turned the corner were, "It gets cold outside late at night." Everything she did was calculated and everything seemed to work. But still, I wondered, how had they passed those hidden wire cutters while sitting in the visiting room? In front of staff. I was curled up on my bed and had the blanket pulled up to my neck, reading one of Carlene's philosophy books. Capitalizing on our ever-increasing freedom to move about SSU during certain hours, Kathy walked into my room quietly. The look on her face startled me. I thought I'd done something wrong. Paranoia still prevailed, but light-heartedly I said, "Hi, what's the serious face for?" Without blinking, she said, "It's decision time, Susan. Are you or are you not coming with us?" Silence. If you decide to go, you know that because of your name, if they see you, they'll shoot you to kill. And once you're on the other side of the fence, you're either with us or you're on your own. You know everything I know about how to get out. You've proven yourself to be valuable. Spiders told you that. So if you decide not to come with us, you can come later, on your own. But you must understand that once I'm out there, there's not gonna be a whole lot of time. So I'm gonna be busy. I'm going to bring it down fast. I was born a revolutionist. I lived through the underground scene in France during World War II. My parents died in the underground, and I'm not about to stop now. I believe in what I'm fighting for. If you don't, then tell me now, sister, because I'm ready to make my move. I knew something about Catherine's childhood. It had been full of pain. She was the daughter of a Hungarian musician and a woman of German Jewish background. They fled from the Nazis to France and there had fought in the underground after the fall of that nation. They ultimately committed suicide during the war. Catherine was adopted by an American family when she was 8, only to have her adoptive mother commit suicide after being stricken with cancer. Catherine cared for her blind father, a psychologist, until he remarried. Then she went off on her own, marrying, divorcing, playing in small movie parts until she met Bobby and, through him, Charlie. She was one of the most talented members of the Manson group, an outstanding violinist and a magnificent singer. She was experienced, and she was tough. I don't need any albatrosses around my neck, Susan, and I can't carry your load for you. There are people out there who will hide you if you make it. If you don't make it, well, you've gone down fighting instead of lying here dead in your head. I still didn't answer, so she rambled on. I want you to know that all you have done for us so far has been appreciated. I've taught you as best as I can. I thank you for staying up and typing those nights while I was working on getting my bar out. If I'm busted before I make it and you choose not to go, they can't implicate you one bit. You can merely say you didn't know what was going on. But if you try now and get busted with me and Mary, you'll never be given another chance by them. I sat on the bed and picked at the bedspread. In all honesty, Kathy, I've really weighed it all. I've considered the chances. I know I can't stay here with them, Pat and Liz. They drive me crazy. You know I can't handle their games anymore, and the thought of staying in SSU the rest of my life blows my mind. I stopped. I had to go on. Could I? But I'm not ready to go with you yet. If I do go, and when I do go, I'm going to have to do it on my own. I can't join you and Mary and Spider. That is too much like the past. I don't want to be on your trip. I want my own trip. Can you dig it? I'm together enough now, I think, to know I've got to stand alone and to make my own decisions. This is my first decision. I'm going to stay behind. I was exhausted with my spiel. Exhausted and afraid. Was I right? Catherine spoke. I hear you, sister. You come a long way. But seriously, Spider will be proud of you. He'll be disappointed that you aren't coming with us, but he'll understand. And your stand, when you make your move, will make a lot of dudes inside want to have a woman like you on their team. Don't worry about finding a man. He'll find you, Susan. She was very close to being as tender as we once had been toward one another, but she pressed on. I'll write you through your attorney if I need to contact you for anything. All right? I nodded. Tonight, she said softly, I need you to type real loud one more time. Pat is going to turn up her stereo loud for us, and we should be all the way through the bar tonight. Mrs. Barnhouse will be on it. She ain't too smart, so I'll tap on the wall when I need you to stop typing. Mary will be in my room around midnight. Her lock is all ready. She hesitated. This is it, sister. Time to get it on. Check you later. With that last word, the Together Witch left. She knew her business, and I respected her. But the old affection was gone. The only thing I was really attracted to by then was her power to make things happen. She was just like Charlie, and apparently Spider. If she pictured things in her mind, they seemed to happen. I hammered on the keys till my fingers were sore. I'd been at it for nearly 2 hours. Suddenly, I felt something in the air. Something was wrong. I stopped typing and Pat's stereo was suddenly turned way down. Leslie was saying something to Pat as I got up and went to my grill door. Mrs. Barnhouse was standing in front of Kathy's cell. "Don't move, you. It's all over. You've had it." Confusion rolled in like a whirlwind. All the lights went on, and staff people filled the corridor. For 4 hours, a storm raged, such as CIW had never seen. 2 women had come within a fraction of escaping from the highest security this medium to minimum security prison had to offer. The screen was off its brackets. The last bar needed to clear the window was all but an eighth of an inch through. And in one cell were the 2 women, a pair of wire cutters, 2 backpacks with makeshift camping gear. All unheard of. I sat quietly on my bed. I wondered about all the privileges we were going to lose. The ones we had worked on for 2 years. We'd just have to start over. But what about Catherine and Mary? They too would just have to start over. I shook my head as I thought about the second plan they had already laid out should the first go awry. Nothing was outside their calculation.